came from a family that lived in a 1,600 square foot house. My dad was a machine shop instructor, and my mom was a 2-year-old teacher at a church development center. It was a meager life. I got a scholarship to go to a private high school there, and they called it a leadership scholarship, but strangely enough, they kind of recruited me off the state championship baseball team. But I can remember going to that school and looking at all these different people coming in. Every kid that came to that school had a car, and it wasn't just any car. They had a nice car. So remember when Pierce Brosnan was the first James Bond movie to start back up in the 90s? And his car in that movie was a Z3 BMW. It was a super cool car. A young boy at my school drove one of the first ones sold to the public in the United States to school. Or when the Dodge Viper came out, a girl drove one of those to school. I remember going over to some of my friends' home and thinking, my house will fit in your kitchen. There was a time I looked at people and thought, if only. I have to admit, sometimes I still have those thoughts. I think that what I didn't and sometimes don't realize, that the very fact that I have a roof over my head at all, have some folks looking at me and going, if only I had a 1,400 square foot house like that guy. I didn't have to live here on the street. It's interesting how much time and thought we put into our own personal wealth. Read James 5:1-20. Have another person retell what they've heard and adding in their own relevant applications. James continues a theme of talking about how people are corrupted and misled by wealth. How have you seen this to be true? Have you seen this in your own life? Discuss in your groups. James continues on in chapter 5, like in all of his previous chapters, to call us to be people of high integrity and people of action. Integrity seems to be a characteristic of the past so many times. You've probably heard people from the greatest generation tell stories of how they'd make a commitment with nothing but a handshake. And that handshake was as solid as any binding contract with the brightest lawyer you've ever met. People were people of their word. There were several times I talked to my granddad about this. He had all kinds of stories about how people in the little town of Coffee Springs, Alabama, would take care of each other. I'd ask, how did you know they'd be true to their word? He'd simply say, because they said they would. Verses 12-15 calls us to be people of high integrity and high faith because we are followers of Jesus Christ. Do you feel like that as followers of Jesus today, we practice having high integrity and great faith that is mentioned in these verses? What makes you think that way, and how are you personally at practicing this? How can you practice this? Discuss that in your groups. We come to verse 16. This is one of those verses that we like to read and tell people about, and we don't really want to practice. I think somehow in our Christian culture, we know that we're supposed to be a hospital that I can attend. But moving from what we know to what we do is another subject entirely. Throughout the entire study, for me, I've been convicted over and over how being followers who believe is great, but being followers who just believe and don't follow through with action is totally useless. So to close out the series, I want to invite you in your groups to practice what verse 16 calls us to do. Go around the room and allow everyone the opportunity to confess a sin or some struggle that they may be currently facing. And at the end, take a few minutes to pray over these, because the prayer of a righteous man is powerful and effective.
to rap on the.
That wasn't too bad.
That